Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching in the world. My name is Sean Driver, and this is the Red Horde. On this episode, going to talk about the announcement of Wrexham CEO Fleur Robinson back on June 15th that Wrexham had reached a £20 million turnover. What does that mean? And look at the responses of some of the other people on the internet as to their take, especially those who are not Wrexham fans. The message that was out there, Hollywood owners, American money, buying their way to promotion, but the one that really stood out was they're going to break financial fair play rules. In a word, to summarize, my response is bollocks. But in a paragraph, I'll say, I think it's an interesting dynamic with English football fans who don't give two crumpets about what the club earns or spends. As I see it, English fans are primarily concerned about the product that's on the field, the players that play, and as long as the financial fair play rules are not being broken, the results on the pitch are all that really matters. I think it's unique and different from what we experience in North America, where our sports governance is very much about a salary cap world, where there is an overspending on contract that affects the team's competitive nature, their ability to compete, and fans, even fans of that team, will blow up if there is a signing that is too much for a player, it's too rich, it's too risky, because it ends up harming the club long term. Same rules don't apply when it comes to football. But despite all of those fans who are screaming, they're not going to follow FPP, they're overpaying for players, they don't have the revenue to justify it, I say it's just not true. Now, I understand the freak out moment. The traditional mechanism for generating revenue is tickets, the funds that you receive from the league, it's broadcast deals. What's increasingly becoming a significant source of revenue, especially from non-blackout restricted international fans, is streaming revenue. And Wrexham has a lot of international fans. I can imagine being a fan of Bradford 4 years in a row in League Two, 10 out of the last 15, and their calling card, attendance. 3 times the league average, almost double the amount of the team that's in second, Stockport, and essentially for the last 3 seasons, living in the mid-table. The old-fashioned bum in the seats mentality is no longer the model. We big, many people, we win. That's done. So now, for the teams that are in League Two, League One, the EFL, not including the Premier League, they're getting drilled by what can only be called a marketing maelstrom that they can't seem to emulate. And I know what that's like. I'm a Blue Jays fan in baseball, same division as the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. I'm a Raptors fan in the NBA, used to little guys getting punished by the benefits that the larger markets have. But I suggest this is the new dynamic in England, and it's permissible under the regulations. So I've looked at those, and what I can't find is anyone in the lower tiers, Championship, League One, League Two, who have flipped the revenue generation model into a voracious, pence devouring machine that Wrexham has become. So £20 million, is that a legitimate turnover? And what does that mean for regulations? Well, I'm going to try and get into it. So I previously recorded a video to talk about regulations, and I found out boring. Needs a little bit of context, and I think that the comments of Fleur Robinson provide that context. So before that happens, just want to give a general overview, just chronology. You have Robin Ryan taking over the club late 2020, early 2021. We know that the turnover, and I'll describe what that is momentarily, at the end of the 2021 season was just shy of £1.5 million. Advance a year forward, significant increase to the turnover, now up to just shy of £6 million. But then June 15th, just this year, a couple of weeks ago, The CEO, Fleur Robinson, says turnover is 20 million. Specifically, she was speaking at a women in business luncheon. It was reported on Wrexham.com, and what she said was this: the club has seen turnover rise from 2.5 million to 20 million, and as part of their mission statement, there being Rob and Ryan, they've made it clear that they want to develop the stadium, increase crowds, and make a difference in the community. I can hear the gasps. I've already had many people on the internet and got into conversations with them where they've declared, those are lies, it's impossible. And often there's a dose of expletives and insults that's thrown in there. Can't be bigger than Bradford. Can't be bigger than some of the League One teams out there. Bolton was one of the supporters I was chatting to. We've got bigger attendance. This is wrong. And so before I get into it, why does turnover matter? Well, it matters specifically as it comes to player-related expenses. Think salary, it does go beyond that. It includes pensions, it includes benefits, accommodations, those things. But in simple terms, there are two things in the regulations that end up determining what you can spend your money on: turnover and football fortune. Or sorry, not what you want to spend it on, but how much you want to spend on player salaries without being offside of financial fair play rules. And I should say, it's actually called the Salary Cost Management Protocol, SCMP, within those regulations. I don't know why there's another acronym that was used to describe the same thing, but in another league. But SCMP isn't referred to by anybody on the internet. It's colloquially always financial fair play. So I'll stick with financial fair play. I appreciate it's SCMP within the regulations. But we go to the regulations, page 443 of them, to define what is turnover. And I'll bring the entire thing up onto the screen. But really it breaks down into this. You've got league distributions, you've got match revenue, you've got friendly match revenue. So those are the games that aren't played in season, in league, those sorts of things. You've got commercial, and I'll put that into quotation marks because it's exceptionally broad. Sponsorship, merchandise, stadium revenue, if you own the stadium, of course. And then there are some smaller categories out there that are hospitality, club lottery, catering, those sorts of things. And then the catch-all other income, which requires permission from the league in order to use that. Football fortune, not going to be the focus here. That's not annual income, and it can't be predicted. It's largely fortune, it's bonus. Things that you can't rely on as far as a club that are going to happen every year, although some of them do, i.e. transfers. Those numbers will go up and down any given year. But trophy competition money, independent lottery donations, cash injections that are not a loan, equity, accumulated profits, those things are all football fortune. So we're going to put those in a box, compartmentalize them, set them aside, because really we're talking turnover because that speaks to the health of the club. Go back to Fleur's statement then, 20 million. Where did that come from? Well, I'm going to put the comments down in the comments below the description. I'm going to put the websites that I've gone to that particularize this. But in the financial records were released by Wrexham. Not all League Two teams do that. And what they talk about there and what they provided was Matchday income was 2.65 million. So that's your gate receipts. That's that information. Some clubs, when they report, they include streaming. Now that that's been a thing for Wrexham, streaming revenue was not included in those numbers because they'd only streamed for really the end of 2022 and start of 2023. So not the same annual review. But Matchday income, 2.65 million. You've got your retail income. That's your jerseys, your hats, whatever it is. 1.3 million Wrexham had there. Your sponsorship and advertising, front of jersey, sleeves when we were in the National League. Can't do that here for League Two because you've got to keep them free for the league. Back of jersey, stuff that goes on in the stadium. Sponsorship, that number was 1.05 million. Those were particularized out in the review, in the report. What wasn't, we're £972,000 short, and what that was is there was no explanation publicly, but there's lots of options there, and we'll go through that and explain it. So now what I intend to do is to take that 20 million and explain why I think and where I think there may be some increases, and how did we get to 20 million pounds. That's a massive jump from 6 million to 20 million, and I think for a lot of people that's why it's been disbelief. Just it can't be real. Matchday income, I'm going to suggest, is a fair number, is 2.75 million. And I'm going to say that because we know that matchday income is not going to go up very much. Wrexham sells out away and at home. There was a ticket increase for season tickets back in the previous season. But I suggest let's just leave it at a conservative number. We'll increase it by £100,000 from what it was in 2022. So that's from 2.65 million up to 2.75 million. I think it's probably going to be more than that, but we don't need to do that to demonstrate that $20 million is the turnover. Retail income, I'm going to suggest, is an increase of $450,000, such that it jumps up from 1.3 million up to 1.75 million. How do we get there on the retail income? Merchandising, well, we know that 8,600 jerseys were pre-ordered on the first day that they were available. We also know that the league suggested that there were 35,000 jerseys that were pre-ordered in advance, and the league informed in a post that that was comparable levels to the EFL championship clubs. That's clearly insufficient. It's not going to address demand. They're going to have to order more. They should be ordering more because it's all profit. So unsuccessful at finding a number of how many jerseys were sold in 2021 and 2022 as a benchmark, but I know that they've introduced hats this year, or at least this particular one, and I believe there's one more out there. So I think $450,000 is exceptionally conservative, but again, easy to get to 20 million pounds here when you start to go through the numbers. So we've got those two numbers. The next one, sponsorship advertising. It was 1.05 million. I'm going to suggest that we add 200,000 pounds to it to put it to 1.25 million. We've lost the sleeve patch sponsorship because of, as I said, you've got to have room for Sky Bet and EFL. But I suggest there's going to be an increase from United Airlines. That's to be anticipated. When TikTok got on board, when the club was first purchased, it was really solely on the powers of the owners and what prospective advertising revenue that could be generated from TikTok via the sponsorship and the documentary that was out there. The scope of it wasn't necessarily as well known when TikTok got on board as it is now. So there's more guarantees. I think 200,000 pounds is really low, but I haven't found a number that ends up particularizing what exactly United Airlines or Vista Print, who moved from the sleeve to the back, or even Betty Buzz contributed to the sponsorship dollars. So 200,000 I think is exceptionally conservative. But again, we're going to get to 20 million here once we start to tally these numbers up. EFL Distribution. Unlike in the National League, the EFL and the Premier League distribute funds down to the other tiers for the purposes of ensuring the health of the teams that are not in the Premier League and their ability and their climb to go up top. This year, or last year, it was 1.1 million. I have not heard what this number was. I don't know if there's an inflation bump or if it's the same amount. I know that the broadcasting deal that Sky signed goes into effect next year, so there's going to be a jump there that can be anticipated. But I said for this year, let's just keep it the same number, 1.1 million. We'll go with that. Again, we're just trying to get to 20 million. So not much argument, I suggest, about the above. And if you add those numbers together, we're at $7.85 million already, well on our way to that $20 million. So now the next item, a little bit of speculation here, but that's with the documentary revenue. The numbers that were put out there were that it was £430,000 per episode that were provided to the club. That's 18 episodes. You do the math, 18 times 430,000, you end up with 7,740,000. Well, that's a significant chunk of change and almost matches what the traditional stream for revenue provided. I don't think, and there has been discussions of this, I don't think that documentary revenue makes up the entirety of the 12 million pounds. It's possible. It's possible that there may have been a payout in advance in negotiating season 2. I hope I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, then there's even going to be a larger windfall that's coming forward, but trying to be conservative in the estimates. So we'll just stick with the $7,740,000 that comes from that math. The next source of revenue that we can anticipate is from Friendlies. Now, last year, 2021-2022, the teams that were involved, we're talking Nantwich Town. They had 1,427 people attend that. They had a Spanish second division team that they played, Leganes. It was 11,454 capacity at that stadium, but I don't know what the attendance was, wasn't able to figure that out. They played Nottingham Forest under 23. unknown or no attendance reported. And Manchester United, they've actually played behind closed doors, so 0 attendance there. And Macclesfield was the other team, 4,076. This year, an entirely different agenda when it comes to the friendlies. You're going to end up with Chelsea at Keenan Stadium in North Carolina, 51,000 capacity, 80% I believe is what we're hearing as far as the ticket sales go for each of the facilities in the United States. You'll have LA Galaxy 2 at Dignity Health Sports Park in LA. That's 27,000 people. Manchester United at Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego, 35,000 people. Philadelphia Union 2 at Subaru Park in Philadelphia, 21,000. Now, those tickets are selling for much more than they do in Wrexham, $55 to $500. Most of them sitting in that $125 US to $250 US price range. But that range, 55 to 500, is 43 quid to 393 pounds. So I attempted to try to find out, well, how does that work for those clubs that go overseas? And there was a report that was out there, and the suggestions that they were that, and this is from a Gary Hobson who organizes these sorts of things, is that when you're traveling overseas with some of those larger clubs, and I say Wrexham is larger because of the US following, because of the global following that's out there, that the larger teams have the opportunity to pull in £4 million and only spend £1 million. So what did I do is I suggested half of that, £2 million. I actually think it could be higher than that, because I do believe that those clubs are on near to being on par. And yes, that sounds like insanity to suggest, but I think that it'll be a 50-50 potentially at best, or a 60-40, 60 for Chelsea, Manchester United to 40% for Wrexham at those games. Another source cited that it wasn't based on ticket sales, 4 million and $1 million to spend to get there, but rather a fee per play system. And they suggested that for the elite teams, it's 2 million per game, 2 million per game. And for the lower teams, 500,000. So I said, let's take the lower one, even though they're marketing darlings right now. Let's take the $500,000. Both ways get me to that $2 million figure. I think it's higher, but again, conservative, just trying to get to the 20 million. Streaming, now this one's fascinating. For Wrexham, they only started to stream in, I want to say it was November. They had 2 months of reporting. 2 months of reporting that they had made, Wrexham had made £225,000 over that time period. Well, we know that they're not going to be streaming for only 2 months. It's going to be about 9. So I took that 225,000, divided it by 2, multiplied it by 9, and the number for streaming revenue expected, and again, very conservative, $1,350,000. How did I get there? Well, the math is at a monthly rate that would get to $1,012,500. That's taking 225,000, dividing it by 2, multiplying it by 9. But I anticipate there's going to be another increase, because in the National League, Wrexham was only receiving 60% of the revenue from the streams. In the EFL, they can anticipate 80%. That's a 33% increase. So you take what they made, assuming everything's a constant, same amount of subscribers going forward, same dollar amount, amount in pounds. That's not going to be true, because there is a bit of a bump up there. But assume that the same amount of revenue comes into play, you're going to end up with a streaming revenue of £1,350,000. So now you take all of those numbers, and where do we end up? That gets us to $18,940,000. That's just over 1 million short of Fleur's statement, and we still don't know what is their true haul going to be from the friendly. Is there more revenue that could come in from the documentary? I think the streaming revenue is going to be far in excess of 1.35 million quid, if not double that number. In fact, there are more fans out there around the world starving for more Wrexham in their life, and I anticipate that number to increase. We haven't included social media advertising revenue, which we know the growth that TikTok, YouTube, Twitter have all had. There's going to be revenue that's received from there. That's going to increase. And the merchandising, I suggest, is going to have a larger bump. But okay, great. Those are the numbers. What does that all mean? Well, now the team is able to spend I say 50% because that's what the regulations say. There are others who intimate that it's 55%. I don't know whether there's an anticipated change when the regulations come out for next year. I'll have to have a look at them when they do. I can only rely on last year's regulations say specifically 50%. But you've got now this turnover, and they can, should the club decide to do it, elect to apply that to their player-related salaries. And they're not limited only to 50%. They have the capacity to use accumulated profits to get approved advances into the club, to transfer revenue if they've got it. That stuff, donations to the club, those all qualify as turnover, and 100% of that can be used on player-related salaries. So there's room here for just off of turnover to cover certainly what our salary level is at, but even more than that should they choose. So that leaves two topics going forward. One, what were the player-related expenses in comparison to that 20 million, and how close do we get to the 50%? There were two sources that I found that give some insight as to what those numbers are. There was an article in The Athletic, again down in the description below, that estimated that the wage rate was going to be around 2.3 million pounds. There was another one from salarysport.com that has it at 3.6 million pounds. I have no way of reconciling the difference between those two numbers, but I put it out there as a range. And I suggest, though, when you're looking at 50%, there is an opportunity to spend some substantive salaries to build the team up even more. But not what I suggest, and not what I think that the owners are going to do based on the conversations you can hear when they talk to other podcasters from Wrexham and people on YouTube and that sort of thing from their own videos. What do I think we can expect? Well, the documentary isn't going to run forever. I sure hope it does, but at some point in time, that sort of interest may end up waning. But what we know is sponsorship dollars are likely to increase this year, and I suggest stay constant on a go-forward basis. We know that merchandising's on the way up. We know that match receipts are eventually going to increase when the COP gets put into place, and we also know that there is at least a buzz. I haven't seen the actual documents, but a report that there is 17 million pounds of public funds that are going to go in towards improvements at the racecourse. So you're going to have increased capacity. That's outstanding. We also know that the EFL distribution, both in League 2 and all the way up, is going to increase because of the new Sky deal. In addition to that, hopefully Wrexham ends up climbing the ladder some more, and as you move up, you get a bigger share, a bigger cut of the pie. So we can, knowing that the documentary is probably, Welcome to Wrexham, is probably not going to last forever, because no television show does, except for the one that Rob McElhenney seems to be on. So this is where their brilliance comes into play, Rob and Ryan, and that is they're investing in the infrastructure. They've started with the COP. Even before that, they started with securing the freehold and owning the stadium. Now they're improving what was a condemned portion of the stadium and turning it into 5,000 seat capacity area to increase and drive more revenue through the traditional ticket selling mechanism. It allows the team to allocate resources from the documentary to increasing the turnover on an annual basis going forward, and they're already on that front. I suggest that it's also necessary because as we climb the ladder, the academy is going to be a major key to Wrexham's success. Kids are going to want to play at Wrexham. You've got to have the labor expenses covered. I've gone through those regulations just a couple of days ago. It's not ready for a video, but man, there is a lot of prescription in those regulations as far as all of the reports that are necessary, all of the coaches that have to be there, the ratios of coaches to players, the times that you have to report, the content of those reports. It's involved, and that's going to cost money. I do see from the annual reports that a lot of the youth programming is profitable, so there may be an opportunity to actually generate some additional profit there. I don't think that's the goal, but the academy needs to be built, and that's going to cost some money from the infrastructure, quality. A FIFA quality field has to be put into place. That will cost some money. And so what I don't expect those funds are going to be substantially contributed and paid towards players. Parkinson has intimated that. They're confident with the team going forward. I still think there's going to be a couple of moves, but Wrexham has the flexibility to do it when the opportunity presents itself. That's novel for a team in League Two. It's exciting for fans of Wrexham because if this continues as far as investing in the infrastructure, it's good for Wrexham. It's good for Wrexham fans. It's good for the owners and for the players that are going there with that stability, starting from the academy all the way up. You know you've got a program. So the wheels are on this thing. And that makes it more exciting because this isn't just Hollywood money. This isn't just a rich owner who's dumping funds in. In fact, it hasn't happened other than securing the race course. And that's an asset that goes and sells with the property anyway, or sells with the club anyway, if and when Rob and Ryan decide to move on. Hopefully that's decades down the road. But this is a club that's being run right. And that's not just limited to the EFL or to football generally. That's looking at North America and saying they're relying on their experts to do what's necessary, and they have their finger on what they can do, increasing the marketing side, increasing the revenue side, and they're letting those with the professional capacity to do so to run the club. So hey, again, I'm Sean Driver. This was the Red Horde. I hope you like this one. If you disagree with me, by all means, I've had it out on the internet for a while with a bunch of people. Throw it in the comments before. We'll chat about it again. I am hoping that we can find a couple of people who still may be interested in doing some roundtable discussions, talking player transfers, which is not a source of knowledge that I have, but I'm trying to grow it. If you think you have a role and want to use the Red Horde as a platform, I want to talk to you. So reach out, let's move forward, and thanks for spending this time with me. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.